All right, welcome to Rapid Fire Manufacturing. Today we have John Reamer. He's been in the trenches of manufacturing, making things not only run smoother and faster and smarter, but he's also had that hands-on experience. So he started off in the shop floor, worked his way up driving lean transformation at Subaru, and now he's leading operational excellence at Battle Motors. He's a Six Sigma black belt, an educator, and someone who likes to take these complex problems, turn them into simple and repeatable wins. John, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, thank you, Dave. How you doing, bud?
Doing great. So I noticed, so you started as a sprayer in the paint booth before working your way up through engineering and leadership. How did that hands-on experience shape the way that you approach operational excellence today?
You have to get, starting on the floor and, working your way up. You kind of get, I guess, a good view of what the people on the shop floor are going through. You can get kind of in their mindset, and as you work up through that, you need to keep in mind, sometimes if you don't get to start out that way, you start out as like a team leader or, a member of some type of management. You might
Mm-hmm.
not get to go through that as much. I think being able to start at the shop floor and kind of understand the basics of that and understand kind of what the people are thinking really helps through some of the stuff we go through, as far as trying to implement, lean tools or, get that mindset in there. I can at least speak to people, at the floor level because I've been there at the floor level. I think they're a little more apt to trust somebody who's been there and had to go through that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it helps a lot with just, communicating with people as far as learning skills. I've learned a lot of skills coming up through paint, maintenance, robotics technician. The skills do help, but I think the main part of it, especially right now in my job, is just being able to be on the same level with people, and it just helps get things worked out a whole lot easier.
Yeah, so it helps you kind of empathize with because you've been there. So you
Yeah.
know how to approach it, how to implement stuff just because you know maybe how they're, I guess, react to certain things too.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you're dealing with, as I've had to do here recently, working with sprayers, working with people who are doing body work in booths, doing a paint shop life's a little bit different than any other part of the manufacturing aspect. So, you can kind of get down and understand what it's like being coated in paint every day, trying to get the job done, especially if you're
Mm-hmm.
manually spraying, worrying about sagging this or thin coating that. And then someone like me comes in and throws on a whole new part of the process or a whole new thing I want you to do. I can kind of understand their, if they have a complaint or, they want to try something different. I can pretty much well understand where they're coming from with that. So it does help. And also it's pretty good to weed out, just in case someone's trying to throw you off the path a little bit, you can,
Yeah.
just look back to it and say, nah, I don't think that's quite the way that works. And so it's been pretty helpful just having the on the floor stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Now, so you've seen lean work exceptionally well in some areas and probably struggle in others. What do you think separates organizations that are able to kind of sustain that lean versus having it sort of fade out?
Well, definitely a lot of it, and I've been to several different factories and not including where I'm working at now, but a lot of it comes down to just the leadership. It's well written and well documented. About 96%, 95%, 96%, initiatives fail. And
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the different people coming in to do it, whether, they're, I don't know, some group you've hired in to do it or you're trying to do the initiative in there, they all have something a little different they do. Some like to start with the tools and move out on the floor. Some like to start working on the mindset. As far as I'm concerned, I think a leadership top down, when you see those companies that kind of sway away from it, that started out real good, then all of a sudden they just go out of way.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of that has to do with you've implemented lean, things are going good. The boss likes what he sees, upper management's all happy. Well, then all of a sudden there's a hiccup, and there will always be a hiccup. And the first thing they do is when that first hiccup arises, they really don't know. They know what they're supposed to do as far as the lean mindset, but I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they just revert back to this is the way we used to fix it to get it out of here, and then all of a sudden that just starts that downward spiral. Hey, we're going back to doing this particular firefighting at the end of the month, or here was this particular workaround to get this to work. We'll take our people from the process and go over here and do something a little different to make it through. So a lot of it, I think, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've had others disagree with me, really starts at the leadership level and works its way down. They can control those type of things. I can't come in and just make something happen. I have to have the backing of leadership. So when things like that do happen, we can get stuff like that under control, and it does come from the power of leadership above me.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Now, you talk about the importance of continuous improvement sort of being second nature. Can you share an example of where a small improvement made a tremendous gain?
Yeah, a lot, here, we've had several wins here at Battle, but, the biggest, as far as something that turned out really small, well, that was small, started out small and turned out pretty big, but it had to definitely been, years of working at Subaru of Indiana. I mean, the continuous improvement mindset was pretty much, well, from day one, you had to test in and get the job. You had to go through all sorts of training. They made sure everyone that they got in kind of had that mindset. So I think I was in maintenance at the time, and the guys in the mix room, I'd go in there and we had well over 40 pumps in that mix room. We had to start rebuilding them all the time just due to a new waterborne paint. The guys were in there complaining about having to rebuild agitators, so the paint would actually come in these 300 and 400 gallon totes. There'd be a little air operated agitator that set on top of it, and it would mix that paint up. So they were breaking down all the time. You couldn't keep these things rebuilt enough because they were running them 24/7. One day I just walked in, and this is usually how it always starts. It's like, okay, why are we doing this? I just rebuilt a bunch of these pumps. That paint's pretty thick, very viscous.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, I don't think we have to. We got the paint vendor in there. We started looking at things and found out we didn't have to run it all the time. So we were running it 24 hours, 7 days a week on compressed plein air, which is pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So we cut the usage time down. We did some programming. I installed some ASCO valves and managed shutting everything off. So we found out over that time, just shutting them off, leaving them on for 1 hour, shutting them off for an hour, actually saved on the rebuild life of the agitators, and also saved about $71,000 a year in compressed air. So, it was just a little thing. And then off that, we had a guy there. He turned around, and once you start one guy's in, it leads into another. So, we saved all this money. We were real happy with it. And well, then we found out as soon as the air would stop, the tote would uncouple from the coupler on the agitator, so that became a safety issue. So friends of mine, they turned around, they designed up a new safety mechanism. By the time it was done, we had a whole new Kaizen there, and that Kaizen in particular went in to win the 2014 Indiana Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. So got to go get my picture taken with Mr. Pence up there in the State House. So it was a pretty cool experience, but like I said, it was just started out as an average, hey, how can I make my maintenance man life easier, and turned into something a little bigger than what I thought it was ever going to be.
I love hearing stories like that. That's really cool. So you're an adjunct instructor at Purdue and Kent State. What are some of the biggest knowledge gaps that you see in today's manufacturing workforce, and how can we address those, or how can companies get involved to address those?
I think as far as, I've been able to sit in on a few things when I was over at Subaru. Here, I've sat in with the Career Center over here a couple of times, listening to some talks as far as these gaps. I think for the most part, the companies already know what they are. It seems, at least from what I've seen, I've not been all over this state, but, everyone has a way of handling, Subaru, they have a especially when it comes to maintenance and technician type people, they've already got starter programs in place and this, that, and the other, they're starting to do that here from what I've seen in Ohio, at least around this area, they're doing that. A skills gap. I think there's a bit of a gap, but I wouldn't say it's exactly a skills gap. There's a difference, when I was growing up, and I'm 52, back in the day, you worked on your car, had a Trans Am, all my friends had Chevelles, you had these muscle cars you worked on all the time. We rebuilt lawnmower engines. We did this, if you're going to keep something working on the farm, you rebuild it. I think a lot of these younger kids today, just due to the fact that way manufacturing is. I think a lot of it's, the planned obsolescence of stuff. Something breaks, you just throw it in the trash now. I think it's just probably the one thing I hear the most is, well, I asked this kid for a socket, and he didn't know what a socket was. And I've heard that a couple times, but I don't think there's a knowledge gap. I've worked with plenty, especially at Kent State Tuscarawas over here. I taught PLC classes and advanced manufacturing classes to these guys. They picked right up on the robotics. They picked right up on the PLC. They all seemed very willing to do the work. Three of them actually came out to work at Battle Motors as manufacturing engineers. And I mean, top level guys. I mean, they hit the floor running. So I don't know if it's as much as of a, yeah, sometimes there's a skills gap there, but sometimes I think it's a little, I don't know what you would say, overinflated sometimes. I mean, there is something there in my opinion, but I have not seen where, I just can't work with a fella, as a maintenance man, we had maintenance starters that would follow you around trained every one of them, never had an issue. They learned everything I needed to know. I think a lot of people expect people to come in off the floor and know everything. And that's just never going to be the case in my opinion. And I mean, if you give these kids a shot, I mean, I have not had a complaint. I enjoy working with them. They bring a whole new expertise to the field, especially these kids from Kent State, being able to come in and, do the 3D modeling. I mean, they're amazing at that. And then all these guys that I know, they've got 2 or 3 different 3D printers at home, or they're building this. I've got one who's currently building a robot. The other one's looking at different types of farming methods using some of today's manufacturing equipment. I mean, it's like I said, I don't think there's much of a skills gap. There's a couple more things they need to learn because they weren't around it as much. So I think the companies are realizing, yeah, we need to be ready to train these guys. I think just the skills gap's just how you view it, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that one, but I mean, I've had success with everyone I've worked with, so I can't see as much of a gap as, hey, you need to know a couple things, because I'm sure there was one time in my life that if you'd asked me what a socket was, I would have had no idea what it was. So just growing, I think, my personal opinion, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if it's more of like an opportunity gap. They expect, hey, this person should have all these skills. And like you said, I know people in the OEM space, just to get their apprenticeship, it's, 7,000 hours. So it takes a lot of time.
Yep. Yeah, it is. I think they're just as skilled as anybody else out there. I think they're willing to work just as hard as anybody else, and a lot of it, some guy with 25 years seniority walking into the little pup coming in, they're going to treat them a certain way. That's just the way it is, I don't thoroughly stand behind that one as much. I think if you give somebody room to grow and kind of use their talent to your advantage and you get in and work with them, you can do a lot of amazing things. I think the factories are doing exactly what they need to do as far as starting little starter programs, getting guys to come up there and start working their way through the ranks and this, that, and the other as far as the technical side. Whereas the kids, I think you just need to get them in there. Hey, show them what a socket is. Once he knows what a socket is, he'll never forget what that is, and he'll be just as valuable to you as you go down the roads. My opinion on that one. So.
Yeah. Get them working on something on the vehicle, and once your hand slips off that socket and you bust your knuckles open, you really never forget that.
Yeah, they'll keep that in mind forever.
Yes. Well, John, we are out of time. I appreciate all the knowledge you bring to the industry. For those of you watching, stay tuned for more industry experts like John.